Well, if you guys and girls can hear that, then you know you're in for a treat because it's time for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Reed, and I'm pleased to be here at the service of website AMP and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, our sponsors who let us do this every week. I've got the best job in the world, so I get to just chat poker with folks like John Somsky, Rob Washam, and Tim Fritz. Gang, why don't you introduce yourselves to Rec Poker Nation and tell them where they can get a hold of you?
Well, you kind of just did introduce us, but I'm John Somsky, Poker Geek MN everywhere.
And I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman50 everywhere.
I'm Tim Fritz, and I'm Misclick Donkey everywhere.
And I think I mentioned it, but just in case, my name's Jim Reed. I'm Bluff Sterini in the home game, and you can find out about me and the rest of the Wrecking Crew by going to rec.poker/crew. And if you don't know what Rec Poker is, we're just a group of folks that love playing poker, love learning poker together, and it's free to join this little cabal. So head over to rec.poker. All it takes is an email address and a smile, and you can play in home games and win prizes, post in the forums, join our Twitch conversations, and all sorts of other fun stuff like that. So come give us a try over at rec.poker. One thing we do every week is we take a post from the Rec Poker forums, and we talk about it here on the air. So this is a post by MaxChaos, friend of the show, Greg Clem, who's done a couple interviews with some of our core team members over the time. And this is about developing a home game or a league strategy. So I'll introduce the question from Greg here, and then we'll see what the gang has to say about it. So Greg says, I recently joined a local poker league that has a Hold'em tournament every 2 weeks. I'm looking for some thoughts, feedback, suggestions on developing a strategy for approaching the game. Some additional details. There's 3 tables. It's a pretty well-run format. There's a point system, and so it's there. You have to kind of keep track of points throughout the series. That'll become relevant later. Each game, there's a bounty on the head of the person that won the previous tournament. There's an optional, basically a kiddie pool that goes towards the WSOP tournament. There's a lot of different kind of aspects that come into this, and he's got some notes about the play, not a lot of 3-betting, some winners and a lot of sort of break-even players, and a pretty good mix of recreational players, thoughtful people, and people that are just there to have a good time and aren't too worried about playing good poker. So he asks a few very specific questions, and it's a great post. There's a lot of general stuff and a lot of specific stuff in here, so I encourage our members to go check it out. But right off the bat, I know, Rob, you've worked in this kind of area a lot before. You've got some experience with this kind of stuff, and you put a really good response out here along with a couple other members. So when you're thinking about this kind of thing, what's top of mind for you, and what kind of advice would you give our friend Max, or friend Greg here?
I think Greg was looking for an overall strategy for the, I guess you'd call it tournament or for the league. And I don't know if that's necessarily what you want to do. It's a point league. So the idea is to finish as high as you can each session to get as many points as you can. Now, he doesn't get into how the points work and what they mean at the end. But I've been involved in some leagues where we had a finishing night. The last night was for all the goods, whatever the prize was, and or whatever the overall prize was. And in this case, it was a main event seat. And what they did is they took the points, and based on the number of points you had, it gave you the number of chips you would start that final tournament with. So the higher you finished, the more points you would have. So it was very important to finish as good as you could each week. So instead of having an overall strategy, I looked at it trying to develop a strategy against each individual player. You can do this. It's kind of like if you're playing the same people every week on Poker Stars or ACR, you can develop their tendencies using Poker Tracker 4. But obviously here you can't, but you are playing against the same players. So you can start understanding how each player approaches a game. There are some players that are going to be very competent. There's some players that are going to be very ABC. There's some players that are going to have a little more better strategy than that. So you really tend to fashion your strategy against individual players as opposed to the whole player pool. And so what I did is I started taking notes on the players. I showed in the forum post, I gave one of the quick, one day I started making notes on everybody at the two tables that we were at. And, that I could use going forward. I could understand the type of player they were based on what I seen them do.
Nice. And you take such good notes, Rob. I know we've talked before about live note taking and how that kind of helps you actually decide on strategy and different lines you're going to take in hands in real time, because you're thinking about what that means for your opponent's range, right?
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, John, what were you saying there?
Well, so another thing you can do, it really depends. Most of these types of tournaments have points which go towards like who gets the prize. In this case, it's a 1K WSOP seat. And then you also are getting payouts for the tournament itself. And you can actually use ICM formulas using the points instead of the payouts to figure out how the ICM works as far as points are concerned. Usually points tend to be a little bit flatter in most things I've seen than payout structures are. But then you have to kind of balance those two things, because it may be right to say, okay, by being a little bit more conservative, I have less of a chance of winning this individual tournament. But overall, I am going to increase my points, which gets me to the 1K. And you kind of have to decide, what the payouts are now and how to get the most value out of it. It's not complicated, it's not easy, but it's you can calculate it just like anything else. And then how you compare those two, I don't really know.
But it is something you can solve for, basically, is what you're saying, just depending on the structure and your priorities there. Yeah. So, yeah, I think definitely knowing the value of the point system is key, and how that should affect your play in those spots, particularly as you get further into the season and it becomes more clear how many points you're going to need or who you're competing against and that kind of thing. What about and obviously Rob's point about note taking is pretty key. And I guess, Rob, your answer to this next question is going to be, it doesn't matter. You just take notes on the individual players and you play against them. But what kind of assumptions can we make about the player pool that's going to be playing in something like this? Or because, until we get notes on anyone, we kind of have to make some assumptions and generalize. Are there certain things that we're going to be thinking about, ways to exploit them or ways to not out level ourselves or something like that? What should we thinking about? What should we be thinking about on that front?
Well, one of the things that I noticed was there was very little change in how people played throughout the year. This was a year-long that I was in, and I've been in a number of them that are year-long. People are pretty much, they have their fixed strategy, and it doesn't really change much. So if you can change your approach based on the individual players, that is going to be a huge advantage for you, because they're not going to change a lot. They have their routine that they go through. In other words, they're not taking notes. Most of them are not taking notes on you. Most of them are playing pretty standard, like I say, ABC type poker. A lot of them, the guy that's in the corner and he's tighter than anything you've ever seen, and he raises, everybody folds because they know he's got aces or kings, right? You have that guy, and then you have the guy that's going to play every hand, and he's going to fold if he doesn't have it, and he's going to call if he does, and he's going to raise if he really has it. It's pretty easy to range them and understand where they're at. So you have to adjust your strategies based on that and not worry too much about them catching up. And if somebody does catch up and changes their strategies, you're going to see it right away because you've been taking notes and you understand what you can expect them to do. So when they do something unexpected, you go, oh, I better change what I range them at or how I perceive them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think, the less experienced a player is, the worse they're going to be at even being aware of what their leaks are and, let alone disguising them or working around them. So I think you're going to find the players just by observing a little bit who are making the kind of mistakes that you should already know how to exploit. Once you now know, oh, this is the kind of player that fits that player type, you should already have some exploits in mind for how to exploit that. So players that are open limping, players that are inelastic to sizing, players that just are way too wide and sticky, players that overfold. You don't need to develop a whole toolkit for how to work against those players. You just need to figure out which ones are which and which ones you can confidently draw those circles around and take them to Value Town, baby. So I always think about like sizing being one of those general exploits. Yeah, Tim, you're reading my mind. Where did you want to take that?
I was just gonna say that. With the sizing, this is a note that you can get on somebody within just a couple hands. Where okay, they're opening to most people have standard 2.5 or 3 big blinds, but this time they went to 5 big blinds. Okay, what's their hand, or this time they just limped. But every other time they've opened to 2 or 3 big blinds. So, okay, so if you limp, usually some people will do that with aces trying to get creative, but for the most part, it's usually okay, I have a small pair or some weird small suited connectors, and I just want to see a flop for cheap. But then when they go big, you're okay, well, you probably got ace, king, kings, king, queen suited, something strong. And that's just some stuff that you can make mental notes of, pretty much right off the bat. When I go play live, that's the first thing I look at is people sizing.
Yep. And that's a good thing. Cause when we're thinking about what to write down and take notes on these players too, we got to think about what's going to be high yield information, what's going to be reliable information, what actually makes good notes. So sizing is a good one to be thinking about like that. And also how they respond to sizing, people that fold at a high frequency to very, very small bets. Those are great. Those are great people to be able to just exploit. Yep. Because most of your range, let me remind you folks, most of your range is not value. So getting people to lay cards down is extremely helpful. And then what are some other, before we get to halftime here, what are some other things that we can kind of pay attention to and make some reliable notes about? Limping, that's a good one. Open limping, sizing issues. Are there any other kind? I mean, even just the mechanical problems with chips, people that aren't used to handling chips, that can just tell you a lot about how savvy they might be about poker math or that kind of thing. You never know.
Another thing that I've always noticed, just kind of a live tell from people, even if they do check, a lot of people will naturally, if it's a board that they connect with, they always look at their chips. They just give a little glance down to their chips. They might check, but say if they're out of position, they might check, but they're looking at their chips because in their heart they want to bet. just a little tell.
Often, if they glance right after seeing the cards, if they look at their chips or your chips, that's a good tell of strength, because they're trying to figure out, they're imagining your chips coming over to beat their chips.
Right.
They're going to be friends. Their chips are going to hang out together.
Another thing that is really, if they're not stack aware, if you'll see people just bet down till, make a bet that should be all in, but they don't. They just keep betting the normal sizes, not understanding how many chips they have behind them or how many chips they have in relation to the chips into the pot. And when they do things like that, you look at them and you go, well, what are you doing? This doesn't make any sense at all. And it's just that they have a hand and they're betting their hand. And that's all they see is that they have X amount or they have X hand and they're betting that hand without any consideration to the stack size or the size of the pot or those types of things. So when you see that, you can understand that they don't really get how stack sizes and SPR works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then 3 betting is another thing that I always note, because some people just aren't comfortable 3 betting. It's not part of their game. They might even think it's rude. And so the people that are going to 3 bet, especially at at a relatively high frequency, you can make other assumptions about them and about what they're going to be doing on future streets. And but that's a sample size thing too. Sometimes people do get dealt aces one orbit and kings the next. That's not something that you can control. But if it's always in late position and it's always against the person you'd be 3-betting, you can maybe put 2 and 2 together there. And this is probably an aggressive player.
Yeah, most of the people that you play against in these types of leagues, they're not 3-betting with anything other than ace, king, kings, aces, queens, maybe.
Yep.
Right. It's very uncommon to see a 3-bet with a ace jack offsuit, for instance.
Right.
And always pay attention to the guy who's been drinking. Has he had too much tonight? Because if he has, there's a good chance you're going to get his chips.
Someone's going to.
Yep.
I know. In my home game, that's usually me.
Yeah, I've been known to get to the bottom of a can of Grolsch mid-game from time to time.
I'm also notorious if I've had too many. I'm really good at. I'll tell you what my hand is, especially if I have a made hand. I'll tell you. I'll just tell you.
I'm writing this down.
Like, hey, I've got top set here. You can fold.
We have to invite Tim to our home game.
Yeah, let's get Tim up to Minnesota.
Make sure we have lots of beer around.
You'd be surprised how often you actually get called on. I got top set. You can fold, but if you call, you're going to bust and have to rebuy.
Well, that kind of goes with what I was just saying. Just because they're drinking doesn't mean they can't get good hands.
That's also true.
That's true. That's awesome. All right, well, let's hear what our friend Jonathan Little has to say, and then we'll catch up on the back end.
Have you ever wondered whether you should call a preflop raise or 3-bet instead? What do you do when you have a flush draw? Do you raise it, or do you just call? What do you do with ace-king when you miss the flop? Are you tired of guessing about what the right play is with your particular hand? Well, my name is Jonathan Little, and I am a 2-time World Poker Tour champion and creator of PokerCoaching.com, where we offer over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where you play a hand and then get real-time feedback from our world-class pros. Don't guess and don't stress. Just register for your free account at PokerCoaching.com/recpoker right now.
So I do want to encourage people to head over to rec.poker/forums. And if you look up this one by MaxChaos, it's called Developing a Home Game /League Strategy. And there's just a lot of good stuff in here. We're not going to get into all of it on the air, but there's some great questions, some great answers, specific strategy questions, big picture strategy questions, note-taking, a lot of great stuff in here. It's all for free. And if you're enjoying this kind of stuff, and you don't need to be a premium member to enjoy the forums or the groups or the podcast or Twitch or Discord. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff that we do for free. And YouTube, a lot of the YouTube videos are free. You can go check that out at YouTube/RecPoker. And if if premium membership's not for you, there's lots of other ways to help us out. You can go to rec.poker/support and find ways to like or rate the podcast or subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to go to Patreon and help us out there, a few bucks a month makes a big difference when it comes to keeping the lights on around here. It's a labor of love. So we all kind of contribute time and money and effort and more time. But we love doing it because we love poker and we love talking about poker with other rec poker wizards like us. So, so I think that might, unless you guys have anything else to add to this specific notion of it. Yeah, Rob.
Just one more thought. Typically, most of these players are not going to bet unless they have it. You're not going to see the level of bluffing. So when you talk about blockers, you talk about draws that didn't come in and those types of things. More often than not, they're not going to be betting those on the river.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see a lot of those types of bluffs. So there's a Post-it note that I always put on my computer when I'm playing certain tournaments, and it says they always have it. So if they're betting on the river, you can overfold.
Yep. And I think the point that Rob's getting at there that isn't perfectly obvious is that even if they're still bluffing sometimes, they can still even be bluffing occasionally there. But I am with Rob 100%. They're not bluffing at a high enough frequency where you should be tailoring your response to their bluffing range. It's going to be heavily skewed towards value. There's not going to be enough combos of bluff there to make it worth you calling down. In the long run, you're better off just folding and exploiting them by keeping those chips in your stack and not in theirs.
Right. And just to kind of build off that with river play, I always pay attention to this a lot on river play. If somebody makes, a bet of some sort, pay attention to, like, are they in a conversation? Are they usually talking? And now, like, they're just instantly, like, not talking. Because if they in a conversation all night and they put a bet in on the river, that's one where you can be like, okay, like, this guy is now very uncomfortable. Or I've noticed myself even doing it. Like, when I have the stone cold nuts and I put a bet in, like, I look at somebody and just try to start talking, like, like get in a conversation with somebody, like, yeah, I want to look as comfortable as possible here, or even with big bluff sometimes. But like, you can definitely, like, pick up on these reads, like, oh, this guy hasn't said a word all night. Now he won't shut up. Like, okay, that's kind of weird.
And, we had Zach Elwood on the show fairly recently, and we talked about a bunch of the ways that can be indicative of strength or weakness. And the one thing that he kept saying was, this is all true, but the most important thing is to establish a baseline with that player. Right. And then how do they deviate from that baseline when it comes to tells? And, like, what can you actually correlate that to when it comes to the strength of their hand? Because some people might get uncomfortable because they're like, oh man, this guy's going to call my bluff, and that makes me uncomfortable. And some people could be uncomfortable. They're like, oh my God, I made the nuts, and what if they fold? You got it. Like, it's really comes down to, like we say, making good assumptions about players and then refining their range according to that. But I think that's exactly right. And river is where you see a lot of that exploitable stuff as well, I think so.
Right. And I would say, like, just from a home game standpoint, like, your first few sessions even don't really worry about trying to exploit people. I would say, like, play your game. Like Rob said, take your notes on people, whether it's a mental note or you're actually physically, like, writing it down or putting it in your phone. But the first, like, few sessions, like, just use that as a study session, basically, for yourself to be able to find exploits in people later on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess the last thing that I'll say on the strategy side of this is that sometimes you'll be in a structured tournament where these point games are, where if you just fold every hand, you can kind of fold your way maybe a third of the way through the points. And like, I'm playing in one of these where I had a scheduling conflict. So I ended up getting really aggressive in the first couple orbits because I knew I had to go do something else in the middle, and I wasn't going to be able to really, unless I had a big stack, I wasn't going to be able to get through it. And I was talking with some of the other players afterwards, and they were like, well, no, like, after, because I did buzz taking a very, very aggressive line. They said, well, no, but like, a couple people that didn't show up, like, their stacks were still in play before, like, when we got down to 11 handed or something like that. And so, because the points matter a lot, since some of these formats, you can even just really be conservative early and don't risk going out before the dead stacks, because depending on the format, it might just be worth knitting up for a while and then getting a little fancier, getting a little frisky.
Well, it's also worth knitting up against the less accomplished players, because they're the ones that are going to go out first anyway. You talk about that in any tournament. Right. You could always look at the early stages of a tournament. That's where most of the weaker players are going to either get a lot of chips or go home. Mm-hmm. And so, take advantage of those at that period and knit it up. And only get involved when you have a really good hand and you're able to take those chips from those inexperienced players before they go home.
Nice. Well, that really puts a bow on it. Kind of like we're putting a bow on 2021. I think this podcast episode is going to come out on New Year's Eve. So it's been a year to forget, folks. It's been quite a run this last couple of years. I know everybody's had their ups and downs, but it's great being part of a community here. And I know I've spent more time with y'all than I have with my family over the last couple of years. And so it's great just to have people like you to talk poker with. And the listeners out there, I hope you've had as great a 2021 as you possibly could. And then you've got some exciting plans in mind for 2022. Before we let you go, let's talk just a little bit about some exciting plans that we've got in mind for 2022. So John Somsky, I know you're the home game director here at Rec Poker. You run 10 or 11 home games a week, depending on the week. And we've got Marek Madness coming up in March. We've got mixed games happening on Saturday. Is there anything, what are you excited for in home game land in 2022?
I'm just excited to continue the path that we've been going. I'm not planning a whole lot more home games
That would be hard to do.
each day, and not a whole lot of differences. But if you have any suggestions, go ahead and contact me. You can message me on the Rec Poker forums or send me an email, john@rec.poker. And I'm just looking forward to. Well, I'm looking forward to hopefully next year I'm going to do something more impressive, at least in my play in the home game.
Let's get you up there for Performance of the Year nominee.
Well, yeah, we have Jacob Kiki, who I assume by the time this is coming out has gotten his 20th win of the year.
Smart money.
As of the recording, he's still at 19, and several other. I mean, Kim Kilroy has had a phenomenal year this year. She has just been tearing it up. So it's interesting to watch all the players, and I want to be in part of that conversation for 2022.
Yeah, me too. What about you, Rob? I know the book study is going strong with Michael Acevedo's Modern Poker Theory. And I don't have the details in front of me right now, but we got a chance to give away a video course to go along with that too. So that's pretty exciting. Someone's going to find a chance to win that. Hopefully
by the time you hear this, we'll have a big contest going on for that. And we can talk about that offline. But
why don't we give it away during the Reckies Award show? That's going to be coming up in January. That'll be a fun highlight to do.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, we're doing it now because we put it on the air.
Yep. Well, yeah, we hopefully we'll have a whole bunch of contestants by then.
Yeah.
Because we should be starting that here soon.
That'll be fun.
But yeah, I think hopefully we'll be finished with the Modern Poker Theory by the time the Recce Awards happen.
Yeah.
We're getting close. We got about 100 pages left of the book. So we should be pretty close to that. And then sometime in January, we're going to have Michael Acevedo himself will be joining us, and we'll be able to do a Q&A about the book, Modern Poker Theory, that he wrote. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you'll be able to answer some of the questions that we've come up with through our study sessions. So
how cool is that?
That'll be a lot of fun.
Just some one-to-one access with Michael Acevedo as part of your Rec Poker membership. You're the man, Rob. That's great. I'm so glad you've been running with that. People are getting a lot of fun. Out of it. Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, I know I was really disappointed. I was part of it in the beginning, and then it's the type of book you need to sink your teeth into.
Yes.
And I couldn't give it the time that it deserved to, but I do plan on catching up and watching all of the recordings in the archives.
Yeah, there you go. When you have more time to dig into it, you'll have Rob and the gang leading you through chapter by chapter with all his slides and everything else too. And Tim, what have you got lined up in 2022? I know you're rocking the Sunday morning warm-up routine. That has been phenomenal, man.
Yeah. So we do a DTO. It's a post-flop trainer every Sunday morning before the grind. The grueling grinds some Sundays can be, but it really helps get your mind right. And, it helps with post-flop play. I mean, whether they have, there's ICM study, which we haven't even begun to dabble into. We're still mainly doing single race pots at this point, but we're just kind of working through things, and it's really helped me understand solvers. I know, I was doing solvers before with coaching and everything, and some things I just couldn't understand percentage wise because I wasn't necessarily running the solves myself or diving deep into them. But it's just everything's all right there, and so you just click on the hand and okay, they're betting this hand 40% of the time, this hand, you're barreling with it big 60% of the time. Okay, here's my bluffs, here's my nutted hands. It's really eye-opening, and it's a great way to warm up because let's face it, it's a lot better to make mistakes on an app where you're just kind of playing through, doing some study and having fun with it versus in your, $215 buy-in Sunday million,
Yeah, you said it, man. Well, and I really like the way it's really good at visual feedback, which is great. And it also it gives you immediate feedback on your play where you can go back and sort of see what you could have done differently and why, break down the spot in real time like that and see it all laid out. So I can, as a training tool and as a warm-up tool, I can see why it's really, really valuable. So keep it up, man. Those have been great sessions. I know as more people catch on and get involved, it's just going to get better and better.
Yeah. It's great. And like you said, you can see your EV loss right off the bat. As soon as you're done with the hand, it tells you sometimes you get excellent. You didn't lose any EV. Well, sometimes you blunder it and it says start over, buddy.
It's a blunder. You blundered. Well, for myself, I'm looking forward to the Reckies Award Show on Wednesday, January 26th. That's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a better job of getting everybody on camera this time. So I do want people to dress up a little spiffy. Let's see what we can show Rec Poker Nation. Yeah, that's right, Rob. I want to see, let's get a little bow tie on there or something. I did a purple bow tie last year, but I'm going to change it up. Maybe something Steeler colors because we're playing.
I wasn't on the live, so it didn't matter.
Right. Well, we're going to get you out there. We're going to get you out there this time. So yeah, the Reckies, I hope everyone comes and joins us for that at 6:30 Central on Wednesday, 26th. And we'll be giving away a bunch of prizes there. We'll be having some surprise guests. We'll be announcing the winners of some awards. That's going to be a lot of fun. So do come and check that out. And I think just getting more live play, more live events, more Rec Poker road trips, doing these collaborations with Learn Pro Poker, all these great partners that we have out there now, like Sol for Y and Gareth James, MTT Poker Academy, Red Chip, pokercoaching.com. Of course, it's amazing. All these people that are working with us to help recreational players get better at poker and to enjoy the game more. So what could be better than that? So I guess I don't have Old Lang Syne lined up, unfortunately, but I know we're all going to be thinking about our listeners out here as we round out 2021 and turn the corner into 2022 and beyond. So thanks to Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, website AMP, of course, Dan and Chris and MaxChaos and 5x5 and John and Rob and Tim and all of you. Thanks a lot. And Happy New Year. Happy New Year.